Hello, everyone. It's Francis Widdowson here. Welcome to the Rational Space Disputations. I know I have not been doing these for a while because of busy schedules and so on, but I was very pleased to find out about Stuart Parker, who's my guest today. So thanks very much, Stuart, for coming on the Rational Space Disputations.
Pile of fun. I'm really glad to be here.
And one of my people who's watching one of my videos said in the chat, you should get Stuart Parker on. He's another lefty who was canceled. And I had vaguely heard about your case, and I haven't read widely about your circumstances. And I actually tried to get some media coverage of your circumstances, but I couldn't really get the details. So I'm really interested in hearing about what happened to you. And perhaps Stuart, so Stuart is a recovering politician and former
Academic.
academic.
I think we can say that.
Okay. And maybe you can just tell the audience a little bit about yourself,
Well,
so that they can know who you are.
sure. I've been kicking around the public square in British Columbia. I have a certain, despite her terrible choices right now, I have a lot of sympathy for Greta Thunberg because I think she is best understood as a failed child star. And that really is how my career began. You become really famous. People view you as, this very principled protege. And then you're never as famous as you were when you were 18. And you spend your whole life chasing that high, right? You end up like Gary Coleman running against Arnold Schwarzenegger for governor of California
Okay.
because attention is a hard thing to turn down. So I was the founder of the Green Party's youth wing back in the day, back in 1988. Led a very successful campaign against McDonald's restaurants and DuPont Industries and CKF foam packaging to get rid of ozone destroying styrofoam, and then have had an increasingly ignominious series of political forays. I was leader of the Green Party for 7 years. Then I went back to school. I'm on record, I think, as having been on the Yes Committee of more proportional representation referenda than any other Canadian. So I was a voting reform activist for many years and, pretty radical environmentalist, pretty far on the left. Worked very hard to get the NDP back into office in 2017. Was very, very disappointed with them deciding to give billions of dollars to Royal Dutch Shell to ship out liquefied natural gas, and then was hired by a friend of mine who was an eccentric millionaire to create an eco-socialist party in 2020. And it's around this time that my ability to soft shoe around the forces of cancellation, the rising forces of cancellation, finally ran out. And so I was the interim leader of the BC Eco Socialist Party in September of 2020 when the forces of gender wang had me canceled for the first time, and that also led to the end of my employment in the academic sector. And but the thing is, they never really stop, right? Like I was looking at what happened to you, just setting foot on a university campus, and as long as we're still alive,
Yeah.
they've got a beef with our continued
Right.
existence.
Yeah.
This was pointed out to me by Russell Barton, a great. He's retired his podcast, but that was. It's like no, they're going for the Richard Bledsoe solution. They want you to kill yourself, and until you
Yeah.
do, these things are going to happen. So that kind of took over my life, as it does. And for the past 5 years, I've been sort of retooling, repositioning, trying to figure out how to make a useful contribution to the public life of the province while keeping the lights on. I fled to Tanzania for a year, but then that went wrong.
Okay.
And now I'm back.
Okay. Well, welcome back. And I wish I'd knew about your case earlier because I could have offered you some consolation because I found it very I read your piece on your cancellations and it struck me again about the terrible kind of psychological toll that these things play on people. And the worst is that your friends, many people who you thought were friends are no longer friends. It reminds me of Louis C.K.'s you find
Oh,
out who your friends are, and he's
your
this
real
really great.
friends, not your cool friends, not your fun friends, but your real friends.
But we should try to understand the world as it is, not what we want it to be. So, it's good to know what's going on. But I must admit, I didn't, that was a big advantage that I had, is that I was not abandoned by my friends. And I guess it's because I've been a controversial figure for so long that, people who are my friends know about my views. So I didn't have that problem, which occurred.
Well, it's
So,
interesting though. I wrote an essay about this called "The Riddle of the Third Mile,"
yeah.
which is about the people with the exactly wrong amount of courage, the people who stick with you
Mm,
so long that you think they're not going to cancel you later when the pressure amps up again.
yeah.
And those are always the worst sucker punches. I think I'm going through that right now with
Oh, yeah.
just today. You never really know um when it's over. And they made that movie Interstellar, which was great for this because you have Matt Damon's character in that movie is the guy with the wrong amount of courage. He has just enough courage to be with you to do more damage when he betrays you than he could have if he just betrayed you at the start.
That's good to know. I that hasn't happened so far, so maybe
That's
I'm safe.
fortunate.
I'm hope to safe. It's been 30 years, so people
Fingers
wanted to bail.
crossed.
Who knows? But you never know. Like it's not. The changing tides of things is really hard to predict. So I guess we should start, Stuart, with so you've been how many times you've been canceled?
I would say there have been 11 separate campaigns in total.
11 separate campaigns. So
And
what is the most significant? What would you say is the most significant
oh,
cancellation?
definitely it would be December 2021
Okay.
when I ran for school board in Prince George.
Okay.
And
And what
this
date
is
was that? What date did that start?
I would have been
I can't
sometime in
remember.
early December. We kind of
Because I was fired on December 20th, 2021.
I guess it was the right month for it.
Yeah.
What had
So
happened
that
with
was,
me
yeah.
was the big thing, the big blow up where I lost over half my friends, and there was the first like Stuart Parker is a dangerous transphobe, blah blah blah. That was that was September of 2020, and there was a hangover from that because I was in very rough shape, and I delivered a bad lecture that people recorded parts of and then spliced together
Oh, yeah.
in, let's say, a counterintuitive order. One of the interesting things about cancellation is they want to make the lies look obvious because the message with people like us is they want to say this could happen to you. You think just keeping your nose clean will protect you? We want to let you know we can tell any lie when the time comes. So um, these folks in Prince George have been sitting on this footage. It was actually subject to an NDA. UNBC was supposed to protect the footage. Um, they violated their wrongful dismissal settlement with me in order to not contest the footage being released. But then Neil Godbout, the editor of the Prince George Citizen, who I'd called out for some genuine anti-Indigenous racism, as opposed to the kind you and I are accused of, um, he looked forward to the opportunity to really smear me. And going into the thing, I had already had a conference that I put together in November, sabotaged by wokes, and that was destroyed. My then romantic partner was one of the wokes who sabotaged it. So I split up with her, went back to Prince George, and said, "Look, you got a week. Put as much distance between me and you as you want. Disavow me all you want. I'm running for school board because in for a penny, in for a pound. If my conferences are going to be destroyed and all this other stuff." Well, I had, and then I brought up Chris Elston, Billboard Chris, to
Okay.
launch my campaign with me. And
Okay.
initially, the morning the launch was going to happen, I had the support of the bishop, the head of the District Parent Advisory Council, and the head of the BCTF local. And all that support melted away over the course of the day.
Mm.
There was, of course, a huge anti hate rally against my campaign launch. And so there are people in the streets and whatever, and they're screaming. Of course, Elston goes out to try and talk to my opponent in the race.
Okay.
Um, but she uses this technique of responding, which I had just become acquainted with at the conference State Sabotage, which is if somebody is asking you questions and you're being unreasonable and yelling no space for hate, and that doesn't work because they can project their voice and they have their own microphone, what you do is you scream into their mouth every time they open theirs.
Mm.
I'd only seen that done the week before.
Mm.
So Elston's out there, that's going on. And then the newspaper says, here is some footage of Stuart Parker admitting to have raped a series of children. And
Sorry, do you have what?
raped a series of children. So the Prince George Citizen coverage initially was that I was an unprosecuted serial child rapist and that they had a video of me admitting to having raped dozens of children. Now, they had to retract that within a couple hours
Yeah.
because I immediately obtained legal counsel, and Glacier Media said, "Neil, you've gone too far. This is too much. This is too creative a smear."
Okay.
And of course, at this point, Neufeld v. Hansman hadn't happened yet.
Okay.
So Glacier Media wasn't sure that you were allowed to accuse people of being unprosecuted serial child rapists without evidence. Ultimately, the Supreme Court ruled that Hansman could accuse Neufeld of being an unprosecuted serial child rapist and did. But, that was all in the future.
Mm.
What happened was, once it was out that I was an unprosecuted serial child rapist, Prince George had, a lot of very troubled people there, big prison, lots of recently released prisoners, lots of rough men working the oil fields. And so the death threats began pouring in, because obviously you're trying to deal with this very serious problem in the community. And it's at that point that Jennifer Whiteside, then the BC Minister of Education,
Yeah.
issued a statement on behalf of the Ministry of Education that I constituted an immediate danger to every child in School District 57.
Wow.
So my friends had to get me out of town under cover of darkness, and I went down to Vancouver to recover from the experience of the smears. So
Just before you go on, Stuart,
yeah.
I'm just trying to get you were an academic, so you were at
Yes.
the University of
I was at the
Northern British Columbia?
So I graduated from the University of Toronto in 2010 with my PhD.
Yep.
And after that, I spent 2 years as a Shirk postdoctoral fellow at Brigham Young University, because my PhD was in how Mormons think about time. And then after that, I worked. I was one of those people on the 4-month at-will sessional contract, putting enough work together in Greater Vancouver. There were enough universities in Greater Vancouver that you can sort of do that. So from 2012 to 2020, I lived in Vancouver and taught variously at University of BC, University of the Fraser Valley. Most of my teaching, though, was at the BC Institute of Technology, which was a great work environment. Mm-hmm. Their liberal studies program was still like a real pro-critical thinking program. It was really the last vestige of the old academy. Mm. Weirdly enough, I don't think I ever got closer to like doing that academic thing that's like idealized in the movies as when I was teaching construction management students at BCIT. But my main source of work was Simon Fraser University. I worked
Okay.
in the International Studies Department and I taught economic history.
Okay.
But when I
Okay.
moved,
And you got canceled from the university system?
I had just started working on a visiting assistant professor 1 year contract at the University of Northern BC in Prince
Okay.
George.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's no question. I had a breakdown during that period.
Mm,
The experience of being canceled,
mm,
trying to hold a political party together, and starting a teaching contract was too much for me.
yeah.
And I got some very poor EMDR treatments that were part of the perfect storm. And
And
uh,
what did those treats or what would you said something about some kind of treatments?
EMDR, it's a way of treating stress from trauma.
Okay.
Um, it anyway, it did not help. A lot of
Mm,
things came together. I was in and then of course, what happened was with the first two cancellations, I was in a romantic relationship, and the same woman threw me out rather than suffer the reputational damage.
okay.
Mysteriously, she took me back, um, but then we got to do it again in 2021.
Okay, so your your cancellation, you were running for the school board at the same time that you were
No, this
an
was a year
academic or
later.
no? Okay.
I lost my job at UNBC. I mean, I tried to hold on to it. The
Yeah, yeah.
union and I worked very hard. It's like this guy taught one bad lecture under extreme duress.
Mm,
Um, and surely he can get his job back. But of course, the reality was there was the university was willing to take a real was willing to take a financial hit to make sure nobody who was publicly against the gender orthodoxy
yeah,
could
yeah,
be
yeah.
working there.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
there was no real way to get the job back. I spent months contesting my termination,
Yeah.
and then after I was terminated, um, there had been a not dissimilar situation at Simon Fraser,
Mm,
and so I had money from settlements to stay in Prince George, build my nonprofit institute,
mm,
offer online courses through that,
yeah.
and teach these intensive courses. And that was all going really well. And I thought, no, I'm going to punch back. I'm not going to take this lying down. I'm going to say that I'm going to run a campaign. I'm a seasoned campaigner, and
Mm,
I'm going to use whatever power I have to denounce what had happened and to the genderists. And at that point, I still had a radio show in Prince George.
yeah.
I still had a good relationship with all of the media except Prince George Citizen. CBC I had a favorable relationship with CBC, et cetera, et cetera. And so I naively thought that I could amass sufficient social capital to do the campaign.
Mm,
And I was very quickly educated on how much social capital could be deployed to
yeah.
shut that
And
campaign down.
it was the gender issues.
Oh yes,
that
a
was the
hundred
cancer.
percent.
Okay. Okay. So let's get into this, Stuart, because this is something that is very dear to my heart, because that's
Mm-hmm.
part of my cancellation as well, and the cancellation of many other people that I know. So, what were your views that were found to be so reprehensible that you cannot be in polite welcomed into the social fabric?
Well, I think if you look at my whole corpus of writing, I have said some very adversarial things
Okay.
about the gender orthodoxy, and you're never canceled over those things.
Okay.
No one is taken out because they've written an essay like my essay, March of the Grotesques. Um, you're taken out because you say something that is just over the line.
Okay.
That you say something like, well, I just don't believe women have penises. Something like that. In this case, it was even less over the line. What had happened was there had already been a big fight in the BC Eco Socialist Party because the guy who created the party, it's like, well, how is it going to go? An eccentric millionaire decides to pay you to create a socialist party for him. That's building on sand right there. That's a structurally inadvisable thing to do. But initially, there was an internal battle in the party going into the 2020 election, and I prevailed because I had built the party up enough that I could win Democratic votes in the party. And so initially, there was this fight over the platform. And I was willing to concede pretty much everything on the gender wag. The point where I just couldn't go any further was the guy funding the party, his wife is a quack. Karina Zeidler, she does gender medicine full time in Vancouver.
Okay.
And so one of the things he wanted in the party platform was this demand that's now quite common and has largely been met by governments that detransitioners are kicked off Medicare, that no complication from you detransitioning or regretting your transition is covered, right? So if you want to transition from, if you want to pretend to be female, of course the government will cover giving you fake breasts. If you're a woman who's detransitioning, of course the government won't. And in fact, will probably force you to go to the United States to have the procedure because they won't even book operating room time for it. So similar double standard with the hormones and all that. That hadn't really become government policy yet. And Jeff Berner and Karina Zeidler wanted to use the party to sell that policy. And I went, no, I believe in universal health care. There shouldn't be a special group of victims of medical malpractice who aren't allowed to use public health care to deal with the malpractice they've suffered. That seems cruel. So, but I'd won that fight in the party. And so perhaps I was a little overconfident when I ran across the Facebook page of Nicholas Sperling. Sperling is best known for having been successfully sued by J.K. Rowling and forced to retract some of his statements about Rowling being a sexual predator who was a danger to children. So Sperling at this time was noting that on his Facebook page that Judy Graves, who had already been canceled, had already been disfellowshipped from the United Church, had already basically been pushed out of doing homeless advocacy after decades of being the primary advocate for the homeless in Vancouver. And even though she had provided the lion's share of the palliative care for Jamie Lee Hamilton, the original leader of the trans rights movement in Vancouver, there was still this sense that Judy Graves was having a good life and enjoying time with her dog. And this was unacceptable to Sperling. And so Sperling gets out there on Facebook and says, you know, how can we further immiserate Judy Graves? I don't remember the exact words. And I said, well, let me remind you who Judy Graves is. You know, when your movement had no friends, she was a major advocate for you guys. I know that you don't see eye to eye on everything, but you should be, you really shouldn't do this to her. Bob Mackin, in his coverage in The Breaker, called that a vitriolic, violent, transphobic screed. So what
of yours, when you said you shouldn't be nasty,
you shouldn't hurt Judy. Don't hurt Judy.
That's a
because I think, as all of us know from McCarthyism, the worst thing you can do is say, that person's not a communist. I know them, right? That always triggers the hammer coming down the hardest because you're breaking the narrative of the thing. You're standing up and saying somebody else who on the blacklist, somebody on the blacklist shouldn't be on the blacklist. And that's the fastest way to get on the blacklist. Okay. Now, eventually, I did make a few other comments, like, I really don't think women have penises. Like, I think I did say that at some point, but that was only about 3 days into the cancellation.
Okay, so it was already underway because you're defending this person who people thought should not be defended or not to be saved from terrible whatever terrible thing was going to be coming down the pipe.
Yeah.
Um,
Now, interestingly, Sperling used this to launch his Green Party candidacy in Coquitlam Millardville, and then came out and announced on Twitter that he was going to go out in a skirt with no underwear and flash his penis at undecided voters. Um,
this is Sperling was saying this.
yes,
Sorry.
this was Sperling. And so I
Okay.
also said that that was very bad. That was a bad thing to do. And that's the point where Selena Robinson, the incumbent MLA in the riding, came after me and organized that anti-hate rally against those of us who said you shouldn't flash your penis at undecided voters in a parking lot in Coquitlam.
Wow, this is kind of hard. This is hard to take in. My story is much simpler than
Yes.
your story. Okay, so the gender issue, has that been the thing that has been involved in all your cancellations, or have there
Oh,
been
absolutely.
some?
100% of them have
Okay.
been about the gender issue. I've said things on the other issues
Hmm.
that have caused people to categorize me variously as a residential school denialist like you,
Okay,
as
okay.
an ableist, a racist, a white supremacist, etc.
Yeah.
But none of the campaigns originated from
Okay.
anything other else. So, what
Okay.
was your situation?
So I was always a controversial figure, and I was hired actually as a controversial figure. So everyone knew my views, and it was more to do with the deterioration of the existing environment than something new that I had done. But what occurred was I was on social media. So I for many years I didn't participate in social media because I knew that was the downfall of many people. But at some point, I my one of my colleagues, uh, I can't remember when it started, but anyway, it was becoming worse and worse in terms of me being smeared on social media. The worst was my colleague Michael Tricello, who called me when I was been invited to Wilfrid Laurier to speak on indigenization by Lindsay Shepard, um, who has just gone through all these terrible things at Wilfrid Laurier. Michael Tricello really had a dislike of Lindsay Shepard and Jordan Peterson. So he said that I was a pathetic racist who wanted to go and hang out with white supremacists. So that's what he said on Twitter. And I thought at the time I would need to get on, I need to defend myself on social media. So, and I made some rules for myself that I was not going to get into long, protracted debates. I was just going to ask questions of various kinds. And that's what I was doing. And then we had the meltdowns of 2020 where everything just kind of fell apart. The death of George Floyd, and COVID at the same time. So those two factors were very destructive to the academic situation. And Wendy Mesley, journalist at CBC, was in a meeting and at one point referred to Pierre Valliere, the Quebec Marxist book, White Niggers of America. And this resulted in her being canceled. And when I heard about this, I could not believe that someone who was as well respected as Wendy Mesley would be taken out for such an absurd thing. Because, of course, that book was an incredible title. First of all, it was exposing what the basis of racism was from a Marxist perspective. So it's class, not race. That's the issue. And I thought it was a very powerful title. And to be sort of saying that you can't say a book title, I thought was just completely beyond the pale. So I started to defend Mesley on social media and said this was absurd. And every time I did it, I would just put a screenshot shot of the book there. I would never actually state this in the copy of the social
Right.
media post because I knew if I did that, I would they would be that would be lead people to come after me. So I was doing this for a number of posts, and then I got this troll who turned out to be a student. I didn't know it was a student at the time. Said, "If the word is so benign, why do you refuse to say it?" And I thought, well, I should, I'm defending Wendy Mesley. I'm saying Wendy Mesley's done nothing wrong. So I should do exactly the same thing that Wendy Mesley did. So I said, there's nothing, the word does not have supernatural power. There's nothing wrong with saying, quote, nigger is a derogatory term used to refer to black people, unquote, and to refer to the book title, quote, White Niggers of America, unquote. And I attached the screenshot of the book and the screenshot of the Wikipedia post that had the definition of this word on there. And I said, so there. And nothing happened. So I was kind of surprised. And then, but things were happening behind the scenes that I did not know about. And my colleague, Gabrielle Lindstrom, who now goes by her maiden name, Gabrielle Weaselhead, saw, aha.
Wow. You just, if this were a work of fiction, no one would believe it.
Yep. Anyway, she had been disliking me for a number of years already and was looking for her chance. And she thought this was her chance. Because I hear this Widdowson had said this racist term and blah. And so she was mobilizing this anonymous supposed student group behind the scenes, and she was sort of fomenting their anger at my post about the Mesley situation. And I saw she said something about students are raising their concerns about this professor who is spreading racist views, and she posted this on social media. And I was shocked that she was just doing this so openly, and so this led me to fight back against her, and I fought and fought and fought using rationality, and that was to no avail. And she had a big group of supporters that were, because she was Indigenous and I was not Indigenous,
Oh,
and
yes.
and the worst thing is when she was doing all this and trying to get me fired, get people to complain to the president and so on, she referred to herself as being loving and kind and just trying to bring people together with humility and grace. So at this point, I decided to revert to satire. And so I would refer to her as the loving and kind Gabrielle Lindstrom, who's just trying to bring people together with humility and grace. And I was doing all these satirical things. And I was, every time someone would say something about me, I'd take a screenshot of it and circle their name and post it. And this was getting, and I thought I thought that when they saw that I was keeping track of their mobbing efforts, that they would back off. But they just became more and more enraged at
No,
me.
this is a source of pride.
Anyway, and then there was the gender issue that came and became involved at the same time. So there's this person whose name is D.A. Dirks, who identifies as non-binary and insists that people use they them pronouns when they're referring to they them. And D.A. Dirks is the partner of a very powerful faculty member. And this is kind of all wound up with it, this kind of power struggle. Anyway, at some point, D.A. Dirks was giving a facilitation of a workshop. Always be prepared for the workshops on how white supremacy culture was infusing the union. So that was what D.A. Dirks was going to be doing. And Jonathan Kay, who's the editor for Quillette, found out about this and started making fun of it on Twitter. And this led someone to become irate about And Jonathan Kay referred to DA Dirks as a they them. And this led another, and it was obviously a faculty member at Mount Royal, but they were not, I don't know exactly, they were not named. They were called Dr. Tony, was irate because Jonathan Kay was referring to DA Dirks as a they them.
Even though that's
And
what DA Dirks had requested.
yeah, but he wasn't referring to DA Dirks as a they them in the right
Yes, with the right
tone,
tone.
the right tone. So Jonathan Kay said, this white supremacy jamboree that's happening at the faculty, it was just a hilarious thing. And I said in a satirical, because I had turned my Twitter account by this time into a satirical character by the name of Frances McGrath, who was modeled on Titania McGrath. And
Oh,
so I
nice.
said, I don't know why Dr. Tony is so upset with Jonathan Kay for referring to this colleague as a they them, because I'd searched this colleague's presentation that Jonathan Kay had looked at, and it had a cartoon on misgendering fatigue and how this person was saying everyone reacts to misgendering fatigue differently, and every time you get misgendered, it's like someone putting a brick in your backpack, and by the end of the day you have so many bricks in your backpack that you can't get up, you're on the floor and you can't get back. So this was this was hilarious, this cartoon. So I posted this cartoon. I said, I don't know why Jonathan Kay, Dr. Tony's getting so upset. This colleague has hinted that they are suffering from misgendering fatigue. And Jonathan Kay is just amplifying a silenced TGBQ2S LMNOP voice. So that was my tweet about that. Anyway, that resulted in a harassment complaint. That tweet resulted in a harassment complaint. And then Gabrielle Weaselhead's harassment. So I got these two harassment complaints about the same time. And at the time, it was pretty clear that Mount Royal did not view social media as a workplace issue, because there had been all these kinds of smears happening. And I've been kind of alerting administration to, hey, just so Michael Trusello is calling me a pathetic racist on Twitter. And, I don't want him to be punished, but I'm just letting you know that this is just, for my own, kind of protection, I guess, to just let them know, I was trying to build a background for how I was being treated, like to be considered if the shit hit the fan at some point in time. Anyway, so I got investigated. I went through 2 Star Chamber proceedings. My social media activity in both of these cases was found to be harassing. And and so when I found out that social media was found to be harassing, when I was pretty sure Mount Royal didn't consider that and changed its policies to go after me, I filed 17 complaints against my colleagues.
Right.
And 6 of them were found to have harassed me. And then one of them, Renee Watchman, who had been found to have harassed me eventually, she filed a retaliatory complaint against me. And then I went through another investigation. And then a final colleague, his name is Tim Haney, he was calling me fomenting that I was a residential school denier, doing all sorts of things. And I hadn't filed a complaint against him with the 17, what then became known as the Gang of 17, because he'd done some things which made me think that he wasn't a complete bad actor. So I didn't do it. But when he didn't have that complaint filed against him, he continued to do all this social media stuff. So I filed an 18th complaint against him. And that complaint was found to be frivolous and vexatious and made in bad faith. And so with the 2, one was the Watchman, I was found to have harassed Watchman, and then I was found to have filed a frivolous and vexatious. That was the next strikes, and I was fired because of that. And I didn't accept responsibility or show remorse, and a whole bunch of other things were added in after these kinds of episodes,
Well, at
and
this
then
point, they could just kitchen sink things. Like
oh yeah, like it's like
there
12
isn't
things.
it's the whole thing is a fig leaf. It's just we have decided they're the sons of light and the sons of darkness. You're one of the sons of darkness,
Yeah,
and we'll cobble together whatever justifications are necessary post facto.
yeah, that's pretty obvious. Well, it's kind of interesting because of all the complaints that were filed. I have just an absolute treasure trove of documents, and the ones that are the most significant is the inconsistencies in all of these different reports, investigations. The ones where I was being investigated, of course, the bar for harassment was very low. And the ones where I was asking people to be investigated, the bar was very, very high. So I thought this was going to be something that was going to be understood in the arbitration process. But of course, that was another kind of horrendous kind of piles and piles of injustices. And then in the arbitration, I found out the best piece of information of them all, which was it was not the university that started everything against me. It was the
It was your own
union.
union. Yes, of course, it was your own union, because that's part of the great irony of McCarthyism, of
Yeah,
neo McCarthyism, is
yeah,
that it's your union that's after you.
yeah,
That everything is inverted. But one of the things I found, one of the things that was hard for me to internalize until I got there, but once you develop an ideology where goodness and evil inhere in your ontology rather than your conduct, it's going to follow that double standards are a moral virtue, that treating two different kinds of people and holding them to an identical standard
mm,
violates the moral theory they're operating with. Their moral theory is that we are benighted people. We are the bad guys. It
yeah,
would be a terrible injustice to hold good people to the standards they would hold us bad people to.
yeah,
And so, one of the things that I find frustrating is there's various levels of denial that
mm,
those of us who've gone through cancellation all have to struggle with. We
yeah,
want to pretend that we live in the civilization from before about 2014, when all the indicators went crazy and we began to start having to dissemble, and all the political alignments started to invert. But one of them is this idea that pointing out double standards to our adversaries will make them feel bad. But this is actually an act of reassurance to let them know that they're maintaining the double standard they believe they are morally charged with maintaining.
mm. Yes, and of course, this is the woke. This is the nature of wokeism, which is
Yes.
that you have the oppressed and the oppressor, and everything that the oppressed does is punching up, and so that's all fine. But everything that the oppressor does is punching down, and so therefore you have to, in fact, give assistance to the oppressed in their various punches, and that was the whole thing. All these skirmishes that were going on. Um, yeah, so I'm still well. My case goes to the Labor Relations Board in February 6th.
I wouldn't set foot in any court or tribunal in this country if I could possibly avoid it until there's some radical change in the composition of these bodies. They're
Well,
so fully
you want
captured.
them to get there. You're not hoping for just. This is the big thing now
Yeah.
is don't expect justice.
Mm-hmm.
What you want is you want the authorities to write their thoughts down as best as they will in these contexts, because they're actually forced to do that where they're not in any other context. They will just avoid it and they will not actually make
Right.
arguments. So we have now several layers of documents, and this will be the highest layer. So I've got the 300-page arbitration decision, which is this unbelievably inept and imperious arbitrator by the name of David Philip Jones, who is just lauded and respected by everyone in the community. He writes this pathetic, absolutely pathetic decision, which has almost no reasoning in it at all. He's a glorified note taker. He just writes down what he thinks everyone said, and of course, it's not even very good note taker. So we got that, and we got all the submissions of all the parties and all the responses to all and now we're going to have all the cases before the Alberta Labor Relations Board, and we're going to get the Labor Board's decision. Then we're going to hopefully appeal the Labor Boards, because that's not going to be favorable, obviously. Appeal that to the courts and get the courts to and on and on and on and on, and then hopefully go up to the Supreme Court of Canada if that's going to be possible.
Well, you see, this is so my comrade Karen Litsky, who is just an excellent human being, who is, the people who run towards you when you're being canceled are the best sorts of people. I've lost so many people in my life unexpectedly and tragically through cancellation, but there are these absolute gems who went, I cannot abide this injustice. I'm helping this person. So the first thing I should say about Karen Litsky is that she was one of the great sort of ironies of neo-McCarthyism. So I had this great opportunity to interview during his last year of life Don Todd, who had been blacklisted in The Philosopher. He'd been blacklisted during original McCarthyism in the 50s. And he had been an academic. He became an academic again after the blacklist was over. But to find him, he went to the CIO and and at that point, the Congress of Industrial Organizations in the US had a set of unions that would employ the blacklisted. And so he worked as a longshoreman in San Francisco. And when I sort of acquainted him with what was going on, and when he was 94 and we're doing this retrospective about his life, it was great because he knew how to deal with people who'd been blacklisted. After our first meeting, his first reaction is to palm me a 20 because that's what they did for him. And, so it was excellent getting his perspective. And he's like, but the unions? And I'm not like, no, the unions maintain the blacklist. It's like in East Germany, that you actually use the unions to run the blacklist. And he goes, yeah. And I go, well, he goes, how are you getting work? And I said, well, Karen Litsky, the candidate of record for the People's Party of Canada, found me a manual worker job. Okay. And I thought, isn't this interesting that here we have Maxime Overdrive's weird little populist party. Yeah. They don't get a lot of votes in elections. No one will cover them. They think it's hate speech to even let them speak. But you go to a People's Party of Canada meeting, it's always free. There's always extra pizza for the people who are living in their cars. And that's where you find a manual worker job if you're on the blacklist. Okay. And so, I found that sort of bizarro world opening up. But Karen and I have an ongoing debate about this because of Plessy v. Ferguson. It's like, I think, right, 1896, the civil rights movement, the nascent civil rights movement, disputes bus segregation in court. And it takes it all the way to the Supreme Court. And it's the Plessy v. Ferguson judgment that ties the hands of every court that wants to take down segregation until 1954 and Brown v. Board of Education. So I'm going to say the same thing to you that I say to Karen, and the argument is always going on. You get to the Supreme Court, and we accidentally have something equivalent to Plessy v. Ferguson imposed on us, where it's going to take years and generations before the legal precedent punching us in the face is undone. So I'm much more of a court avoider because I think you have to look at how Plessy, all these well-intentioned activists going to this Jim Crow Supreme Court and not thinking through how much they would use that opportunity to etch segregation in stone. If you'll excuse me, I just have to step to the kitchen and pour myself a beverage.
Okay.
I shall return immediately. It is no coincidence that my podcast is called Cocktail Hour.
Okay. There you go.
So, well, I've already taken all the damage for having a drink on camera. So why not enjoy the
Why not?
privilege
Yeah,
of doing so? The damage has
definitely.
already been done. So yeah. So anyway, that's. I mean, I think
Well,
it's
it's
a
not,
legitimate
I'm
lack of
not sure about the
authority.
precedent. So it's like, well, who knows? I've heard that actually it doesn't go to the Supreme Court. Maybe it does. I'm not sure, but I want to take it to the highest court. Now, I know that might have a negative precedent. That might result in a negative precedent for things, but I think it's worth it from a standpoint of documenting the destruction of our civilization for future generations. So that's where I assume we're going to get the woke kind of logic, although who knows. But still, I'm really looking forward to the labor board because this is the first time in 5 years that things are going to be public. So,
Oh, that will be good.
so if you like, I can get you on the Zoom thing.
Oh,
If
I love that. I love that.
yeah,
That'd be a pile of fun. Also, I really think that, and I made this case to Amy Ham, for her tribunal. I think we should pass the hat and get you a proper kangaroo suit for the occasion.
yeah. Well, I'm not going to be on the camera because I'm just going to be an observer. Like it's going to be
Oh,
on
right.
Zoom, so it's going to be. But the best is going to be Michael Ford. So it's kind of funny because my lawyers, of course, are all woke, and their pronouns are the pronouns in the bio and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, it's like, oh. And Michael Ford, who's the lawyer for MRU, he's a bit of a rough diamond, and he plays dirty. He's like anyway, so he's going to be just that's the only thing he's going to be able to do is just say all sorts of things about my being incorrigible and all my misdeeds and everything like that. So it's going to be rather an entertaining kind of affair, is my guess. And this is the first time that people are going to witness what has happened, because what happened before is that I was shoehorned into a private thing, and I was, and this is what happens is you want to get it over as soon as you can, like that's your kind of attitude, when you should never have that attitude, because that's how they're you first of all you make mistakes in those situations, and two, it's never going to be over. It will never be over, so you might as well just embrace
Yeah,
the
this has
insanity.
become our
Just
lives.
become,
We can't do
just
anything about
no.
that.
So you
They
just might as
decided
well
that our
just
lives are going to be about
anyway.
this.
Um, so I could have fought the having it closed, but I thought then that'll take more months of arguing and whatever. So that's why we'll do this. Um, so because it was private, they were able to make up a whole bunch of stuff and have that accepted as fact by the arbitrator. My favorite one being that I had disrupted the proceedings so much that they had to reorganize the furniture in the hearing, which had
Uh,
never happened. It was a
well,
completely
I'm
independent.
trying to think of how one disrupts things to the point of furniture reorganization. I mean, I did throw a chair once in a meeting, but that's an extreme event.
I was snickering, they said, and eye rolling, which
Oh
I never
no, you were
snicker and I
rolling your
never eye roll.
eyes.
There was no there was no snickering and eye rolling that happened. But of course, since there's no recording or anything of any of these things, and the arbitrator, was totally behind all Mount Royal's antics and allowed Mount Royal to just get away with unbelievable things. And the reason was because it was a totally closed proceeding. So there was no out external eyes on the whole thing. So thank goodness, finally we're getting external eyes, and we can watch this kind of circus that well, maybe Michael Ford will be less bombastic.
But again, I
The
think
public.
that if you look at wokes when they're out there in public presenting themselves, these are people who have a radically different shame consciousness from us. And in fact, many of them are shame fetishists, right? The woke movement is led by shame fetishists.
Yeah.
And so,
But Michael Ford is not woke.
well,
He's not.
that's good. So the public eye might
No,
restrain
he's
him.
bombast. He knows the only way Mount Royal's going to win this is by portraying me as some kind of monster, and so he just lays it on really thick. The various allegations about my character and everything like that. But anyways, I'm just unbelievably curious to see what is going to happen. And then the fact that a whole bunch of other people are going to see so it's not just going to be, me being constantly gaslit by, all the various authorities. You have some people who are actual observers who are going to be able to see what's going on. So, anyway, so that's something that's making my warming my heart.
Oh yeah,
After
no, there's
going through this for like started in November 2020. That's when this all started. So I guess we're getting on to going to be going on to the 6 year mark.
yeah, no, it's interesting that our stories started about the same time
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I think many people's stories started about the
they
same
did.
time.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think there's a periodization in this thing. I would put it in 5 year chunks. In about 2015, we know we're going to get in trouble and we start dissembling. About
Yeah.
2020, we finally do get in trouble. And about by 2025, it's like, you know what? This social partition has elaborated to the point where we live in a separate society from the people who are canceling us. We have sort of anemic parallel institutions, but our audience isn't the other society. The society is so completely split in terms of its theory of morality, its theory of truth, everything, morality, epistemology, you name it. And so I'm starting to relax into this thing because I think what's happened is, we didn't expect to go through partition, but I think that now that we've gone through it, and the thing I want to ask you about in part two
Yeah.
is I feel like we were trying to avoid the partition for the first 5 years, and then we spent about 5 years in a refugee camp, and now we just live in a different country. And because I feel like what I noticed was a lot of this space that was the canceled left, like people like us who were just like grieving the loss of empiricism and a sort of, ILP, Orwellian socialism, all that stuff. Those of
Yeah.
us who were grieving that loss, there's a space for us. And I think that space is now kind of played out. I think that one of the things that's interesting to me is that we now have we're not part of progressive society anymore, and we don't even want to get back in. What we have to do is figure out how to situate ourselves and our beliefs in this other society that was not made or run by people like us, but
Mm-hmm.
has welcomed us. I think very kindly. Like I think a lot of constituencies, like the Christian right, had a choice about how to interpret our suddenly being expelled into them. And as much as a lot of those communities are on a large social scale immigration skeptics at a policy level, at an actual like enacted social level, it's like, well, we've got all these weird refugees. Some of them are communists. Some of them used to be all sorts of things. Do we take them in or not? And I think that one of the things I feel good about, one of the reasons I'm willing to sort of figure out how to culturally translate who I used to be
Mm-hmm.
into this new society I now live in is going, okay, well, they welcomed me in. How do I even express the ideas that I have in this new world that is different.
Well, truth, I think my own view on this is that there's people who believe there's an objective truth, and there's people who don't.
Yeah.
People who believe there's an objective truth. I can sit at the table with the people like that. I don't have it, and it can be a whole variety of different types that sit at that table. But the people who don't believe that, it's just an impossible.
Yeah, there's nowhere to go.
You can't discuss, like, what can you discuss? In the end, it's just, well, it's all your view or my view anyway. So I think that's what's going on, because many of the people that of course, that's why I'm so interested in having you on, is because I don't really get to interact with very many socialists. Um, like, I have a couple of socialist friends who are, old left types who believe the economic is the issue. Class is the basis of conflict and so on, these kinds of things. And but most of the people I deal with are libertarians or conservatives, and that's kind of the mix that I find myself
Well,
in.
but
And
all,
if I mention my atheism and my socialism, which I should be doing more, because then that's not as much of a shock to people who are watching things. And I'm not very dogmatic about, like, I think capitalism has serious problems, but I'm not sure the way out of those problems. Like, I think that raises more things, but that doesn't stop me from thinking capitalism has serious
yeah,
problems.
that's like we're not going to idealize capitalism. That doesn't mean the dictatorship of the proletariat is a reasonable way to go or possible or even
I don't
reachable
know.
from this
It's an open
location in
question for
space
me. I
time.
don't I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I don't hold with the Marxist eschaton at all. But what I will say is, um, I don't think we can. The fact that our beliefs are built in a certain way,
Mm.
um, I'm not sure that it's productive for us to try and identify our way into socialism now that the word's meaning has changed. I think that, I mean, my friend Lear Keith, Deep Green Resistance. First year I went to a Deep Green Resistance convention. I recommend it for everybody like you. It's a total psychological chiropractic adjustment because you get to meet with what Lear calls the old growth left.
Okay, yeah.
She's both the founder of Deep Green Resistance and the founder of Women's Liberation Front, the organization that does all of the men in women's prisons lawsuits in the
Yeah,
US.
yeah, yeah,
So, very serious people. And she coined the term the old growth left, which is perfect, right? Because there isn't going to be any more old growth, right? We're a thing there isn't going to be more of for a long time.
yeah.
We kind of miss the chance to perpetuate that. But also, like, what socialism means to our friends, to our allies, to the people I have to work with every day, it bears no resemblance to what it means to us.
Mm.
But part of the whole conflict we got into with gender weighing is that the crowd decides who you are and what that means. You don't get to decide it on your own. We might know we're socialists based on the history of our lives, but we no longer live in a world in which, for the crowd, the word socialist refers to people like you or me. And it doesn't matter how right we are from a canonical or analytical perspective. That's who we were in the old world before everything changed. And I remember the start of this because when I started dissembling, it wasn't over gender weighing. I wasn't even aware of gender weighing. And I really didn't think it would shake down the way it did.
Mm.
I started dissembling because in 2015, Donald Trump, Bernie Sanders, and the Brexit movement all put those horrible neoliberal free trade deals before the voters for the first time since the 90s. People were going to finally get a chance to vote against free trade and investor rights and the secret courts and the cross border, being able to move money across borders, all that stuff. There was finally a chance to vote against it. And my initial reaction was, hooray! And all of the people that I've been doing FTA, anti Maastricht, anti globalization, anti WTO work with went, "What are you talking about? Are you a racist?" And I said, "When did
Yeah.
it become racist to be against NAFTA?" And of course, the subtext was this year. It became racist this year. Suddenly, the free movement of capital and people across borders goes from being a far right neoliberal plot to the core of the putative left. One of my terms for who the people calling themselves the left are is the monster shambling around in the flayed skin of the left. That there are these labels, socialist, communist, whatever.
Yeah.
And of course, there are people like Jordan Peterson and James Lindsay who are in accord with the lefts, the new lefts, obfuscation and parodization of ideas like socialism. But at the end of the day, we have to remember that, like, we speak English, not French. The dictionary is descriptive, not prescriptive in English. If we were French speakers, maybe we could be having a different argument where it's like, no, I really am a socialist. I do get to be that because the dictionary says what this is what
But
I am. But in English,
what
the
about
problem is,
like the gender wang stuff? Because
well, that's my whole point. Is if we
they're
say to
attacking the
people,
definition. So that's what they're doing is they're saying like a woman can be whatever you want a woman to be. It doesn't, we're not going to go by the dictionary definition of woman here.
right,
It's
but the reason that you see, there are two different ways in which gender wang fails. One is on the grounds of biology, but the other is the opinion of the crowd. At the end of the day, the polls show no matter how much propaganda you stuff into people, everybody still knows who a man is and what a woman is. That, right, there are three different ways of describing reality: subjective, objective, and intersubjective. And my argument is that only in a complete sociopathic, insane world are definitions of terms subjective. The point is, gender wang fails when you say this man is a woman. It doesn't just fail on an objective definition, it fails on an intersubjective definition because society still won't believe it.
Yeah.
And
And
that's
whereas
why that's the
socialism,
project.
socialism won't fail on that level.
Yeah, the
That's
problem
the
is,
difference that you see is that in the
yeah,
case of sex, society
society
is
can't lose the
society has
plot as to who
absorbed
is a man.
it's absorbed the understanding of woman and man, whereas in terms of its understanding of socialism, it's something that is more abstract, and therefore
Correct.
it's going to be harder to convince members of
Correct.
society
Because there is a material definition that coming out of hundreds of millions of years of evolution of what male and female are.
yeah.
So, and because we're a social species, because we co-evolved with dogs,
Yeah.
and we're a very social species, that knowledge can't be beaten out of us. But the
Yeah.
knowledge of what socialism really means already
Yeah.
has.
Yeah. So what word do you think should be used to describe yourself if you're not going to use socialism
I
or
mean,
whatever?
I'm
Or I don't
constantly
know,
in
do
like
you consider yourself to be a socialist?
I people like the term old growth left. Big
Okay.
fan of Lier for coming up with that because it's highly descriptive.
Okay.
And one of the things I first started noticing with the bad turn was I was a big fan. So back in the day, I could actually talk about science on TV. I wasn't one of these. So when I was doing climate stuff, it's like, no, no, no. The greenhouse effect. Let me explain to you how the greenhouse effect works. Everybody knows what a greenhouse is. This is how it works. And so you had a metaphorical vocabulary that was linked to the world. And from the greenhouse, we abandoned the the people who were working against me for the oil industry when I was doing climate stuff in the 90s when Western Canada Wilderness Committee and Canadian Spaces for Nature and World Wildlife Fund and all the environmental groups were taking bribes from Suncor to say, don't talk about climate. I was talking about climate. And I used the term the greenhouse effect. As soon as the Vondus started getting more money from the other side, and it was worth their while to talk about climate, they immediately moved off the term greenhouse effect. They went to climate change, and then they went to the worst of all terms, climate justice,
Yeah.
which is just nonsense and subjectivity. That's what it was. It's about taking the debate and having it lift off. So that's why British Columbia could have the Green Party and the NDP give $6 billion to the oil industry to create a pipeline, a liquefied natural gas terminal, and bring in a policy called Clean BC that involved doubling coal exports and fossil and natural gas exports by 2050 and call it net zero climate justice.
Yeah.
Because there's this dematerialization. And so my feeling is, if we use language that is material, if we are materialists, we need to use language that references the material order, not a subjective moral order. And so when I use Lier's term, old growth left, people on the right kind of get what I mean. If they walked in old growth forest,
I'm gonna use that from now on.
Yeah. And
because I find, like it becomes difficult with the whole discussions around socialism, because I don't have a clear-cut idea about what I think should unfold, because I've just seen such horrible kinds of scenarios develop, and I don't know, I don't know whether it's true that revolution automatically leads to an authoritarian kind of circumstance or not, or whatever. I understand the debates about why Trotsky thought that democratic socialism was a way of avoiding the issue, because you don't control the state and therefore you're just going to get defeated, like what happened in Chile and Allende and so on and so all these kinds of things. So it's like, I just I can't figure, I just don't have the time to figure out. What I do know is that having false things is not something that is consistent with the old growth left. Like you cannot accept falsehoods. You have to try and say what you think is true, and then allow that to be what shapes how you think things should move forward in the future. Which brings me to another item of discussion, because we don't have that much time left, if you can believe it.
I expected us to run out the clock quite irresponsibly.
Aboriginal issues. What's your views on Aboriginal issues?
Well, I've seriously evolved there. I'm going to tell one of my favorite stories. So before I tell the story, the way indigeneity is playing out, we should talk about European religious and intellectual and literary history first. And there's a reason for that. Herodotus, right at the beginning, in his great ethnographic text, The Histories, which briefly mentions the Persian War, I believe it's there. It might be Hesiod. It's one of the two. Has this wonderful turn of phrase where they're talking about people who are very far away and very strange. And they say, the blameless Ethiopians still dine with the gods. Okay. And I think that idea captured the West in the classical era and has never left us. We're always looking for the blameless Ethiopians who still dine with the gods. Even before we adopted the Judean myth of Eden, we had this idea that there were these prelapsarian people who were still connected to the earth, who were still connected to the gods, who didn't feel all the guilt and shame and history that rains down on civilized people like us.
Mm.
And since that idea became part of the canon, we have looked for those people. Now, of course, it's very dangerous to be idealized by a patriarchal society. I think any beautiful woman knows that. You're actually in a bit of physical danger if men idealize you too hard. And the most so when we look at that, I don't know whether you've read Sam Gill's book Mother Earth. If you haven't,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, I read Rodney Clifton. No, it's not Rodney. Sorry, James Clifton. So James Clifton wrote a really good book or edited volume in it was the 90s called The Invented
so
Indian.
right.
And
So Sam
the book,
Gill's Mother
Sam
Earth
Gill
tells a
was the chapter in there.
so Sam Gill tells a very interesting story, which is that after the defeat of Pontiac and then Tecumseh, after the Trail of Tears,
Mm.
indigenous people who still hadn't had their land stolen yet or seized yet,
Mm.
I mean, I won't say stolen because they didn't own it.
They didn't have an idea of
Uh,
property.
but I mean, look, I'm from the Northwest coast. People had very clear aristocratic ideas of land title, and that's why it was the Niska and the Haida who could win in the Supreme Court because their order was like feudalism but more oppressive, and that meant that their order could be recognized by the courts as resembling something from the era of Magna Carta. Whereas Treaty 8, all those flat societies, how could the courts recognize that as ownership? Look, they had slaves, they had body modification, they had human sacrifice. The courts could see that this was some sort of ordered society in the way that the Americans and the British and the Japanese and the Germans fell in love with Hawaii. Really,
Well, you and I
really
will
vertical
disagree on that.
societies looked
We'll
like them.
disagree on that. Aboriginal title is an invented
Well,
thing.
no, Aboriginal title is an invented thing. Of course it is.
It's
But that doesn't
there's
mean
no
you didn't have.
there's no writing. There's no
Of
writing.
course, there's no writing.
So if you don't
But
have
then
writing, how can you have any kind of conception of here's the legal
you
structure?
had, there was no legal structure, but you had proto writing in the form. Those 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 totem poles are deliberately symbolic. That is an alphabet trying to emerge. You can watch it. You can watch it in Mexico. You can watch it in all kinds of places. You can watch alphabets trying to emerge. You know that was good. They were going to give birth to that eventually, or even
They
if not,
were,
the
but
point
it's
is,
gonna take a lot more time and a lot more technology. And the totem
sure,
pole
sure,
is,
sure,
first of all,
and we're the
you
ones
don't
doing
have
it.
any cutting instrument to cut a totem pole before contact.
So yeah, but why would contact be a bright line? Contact
Well, you
isn't
have
a
a
bright
huge
line for
amount of
our people. Why
development
is it a bright line for theirs?
because contact is a massive developmental leap that happens because of the introduction of Iron Age technology.
I know, but I've read a bunch of stuff about the arrival of Christianity in Northern Europe. I've read a lot of first generation literacy.
Mm.
There are common patterns. The Roman Catholic Church was the Franz Boas of the 5th century when you're up there in Northern Europe with people who don't write, aren't even close, and they show up. Now, the reality is that's how most of us, most of our ancestors get writing, is it shows up from somewhere else and nudges us along. Anyway, let's bracket that because I was going somewhere.
Okay,
So
you're talking about Mother Earth.
so I'm talking about. So I started about the blameless Ethiopians who still dine with the gods,
Yeah.
and then I'm going to go to the Sam Gill thesis, which is that um, indigenous people in the Pacific Northwest who had resources that they had gained through contact, who had communication abilities they gained through contact, went, well, clearly signing treaties is not going to allow us to keep all the shit we want to keep, and clearly Um, Fighting is not going to let us keep the shit we want to keep. You know what we're going to do? We are going to appeal rhetorically to the sense of cultural nostalgia and preciousness of Celtic and Germanic Victorians. And so they looked at how the Victorian era and the paternists had developed these highly nostalgic thoughts about Celtic Europe and about Germanic Europe before Christianity. The Victorians obsessively idealized the pre-Roman Celts and the pre-Charlemagne Germans. They obsessively idealize those things. And you know what they idealize most about them? They're fucking sacred groves. Now, this is the same time as Ralph Waldo Emerson and John Muir are coming along and getting very excited about the sacred groves here. And the indigenous people very reasonably go, so the best way we have, our best shot at keeping this shit is to pretend it's magic. And we're like they imagine their ancestors were. And Gill argues that between 1820 and 1920, indigenous people in the Northwest used this as a deliberate propaganda strategy to falsify their religion, to make themselves seem like the Europeans imagined, those blameless Ethiopians who still dine with the gods. And Gill says by about the 1920s, they started drinking their own Kool-Aid and thinking that that had actually been their religion. So that's my current insight. Now, I may have witnessed the original land acknowledgement in British Columbia.
God, in the Olympics.
Oh, no, way before.
Oh, yeah. The Olympics
way
is when it
before. Okay,
started
so let me tell you, in the 90s, after the first land acknowledgement, right? Because the term unceded territory is a crucial piece of liturgical text, right? It's a religious text. It's like someone speaking Old Church Slavonic or Church Latin or Syriac or Ge'ez, right? You have to say unceded territory. Where does the term unceded territory come from? The courts.
Yep.
And specifically only about BC.
Yep.
Because they said BC is unique in that we didn't remember to sign the documents. We didn't do Treaty 8. We didn't round up a bunch of random people and make them sign something. So because of that, we're now in this pickle, the courts argued, which I would argue is just the opinion of the courts. But what happens is in the 90s, we used to have to, back in the Green Party, because I'm the leader of the Green Party of BC starting in 1993 when I'm 21.
Yeah.
We would need Indigenous people to welcome us to their territory. And so we would call up the local Indigenous government and say, hey, who wants to come out for $100 and welcome us to the territory? And we'd pay them $100 and they come out and welcome us. Well, then we started getting sloppy. We stopped calling them. And then we'd go on a commercial drive and we'd press gang some random Indian and go, hey, do you want $50 to welcome us to your territory? It's like, I'm Anishinaabe. It's like, who gives a shit? So that's what's going on in the 90s. But here's what happens.
Okay, so when was the first, sorry, so when did this?
I'm going to tell you the story of the first one.
What's that?
I'm going to tell you the story of the first one.
Okay,
one of my favorite stories in the world, and you will like for unexpected reasons. 1992, I'm on the board of Save Georgia Strait Alliance, which is a federation of all the local environmental groups surrounding what is now called the Salish Sea, but then was called Georgia Strait.
Yeah.
And back then, environmental groups were local and democratic and self-governed. Boy, we miss those days before they hollowed out civil society in the West. So we had all these local environmental groups, and I'm 20 years old, but I'm still a child star who has yet to fail.
Child star, yes.
So they put me on the board of SGSA, and they have this thing where they have these meetings. We're going to put on this big fair to talk about, and this was a serious issue back in the day. There was a lot of chlorine bleaching. There was a lot of toxic effluent in the strait. There were a lot fewer things alive there than there are now. And it was very important to reduce those chlorine emissions, those
Yeah.
dioxin emissions from the
Yeah.
pulp mills.
Mm.
And so we'd put together this whole federation, or rather, my friend Ernie did, by mortgaging his wife's house. She was not pleased.
Yeah.
Um, and we're having these meetings. First meeting, I move up rapidly in the organization because they decide to have it in the old elementary school in Half Moon Bay on the Sunshine Coast, which had been converted into a fucking animal rehabilitation shelter. So I'm in there with all these weird hippies and all these rehabilitated birds. And like you got these wild birds like flying around, shitting all over us, attacking us, like grabbing my head with their talons. And I'm like, we can't meet like this anymore. So they put me in charge of SGSA meetings, and they make me the vice president of the organization. And all I do is like I book a Greek restaurant once every 3 months. And they decide they're going to replace Frank Nay's old Nanaimo, Georgia Strait bathtub race, the greatest celebration of working class culture in British Columbia, with their kayaking and swimming across the strait thing. So we were supposed to go from Nanaimo to Seashell, and we're going to put on this big fair. Now, at that time, they're thinking it's going to be like the Stein Valley Festival, which was awesome. I used to go to that. It was incredible, right? You got like 6,000 hippies in a field, a big stage, and incredible acts, musical, you know, indigenous people doing their thing, all that. Compelling stories. Ruby Dunstan was a great orator, and we decided we're going to do that. Now, one of the problems at this point in BC activism is the prevalence of the BC Head Injuries Association, which is a self advocacy organization. I don't know why so many people got put on boards because they were on the board of the BC Head Injuries Association. It's like, so this guy's qualification, he was hit on the head really hard. So, anyway, this guy, Chuck Clemens, who had been a great agent of musical acts in LA back in the day, but then he got hit on the head really hard. And so he ended up on our board after graduating through the BC Head Injuries Association. So we put this big fair together. We book all these musical acts. Most of them turn out to be figments of Chuck's imagination. People do swim across the strait, they kayak across, and the Seashell Nation, who signed, they were the only Indians who were so business oriented, they signed a deal with Bill Vandersam. Like, let's give them credit. They go, hey, we're going to donate this field to you. And it's like, well, could we have someone give us a spiritual opening? The term land acknowledgement didn't exist yet. So, but they know what we're ordering up. And this is a political change moment. So, we are about to start the event. There are way too few people there. There are like 800 hippies on blankets in the field, huge stage.
Yep.
And the elder shows up, and she's dressed in powwow gear, which means it's a pastiche of every indigenous garment and style in North America.
Yep.
Pulling out all the stops. We got the feathers, we got the braids, we got the beads, we got everything. And she gets up on stage and says, I understand that I have been asked to come here and give you all a spiritual opening. I would like you all to bow your heads and repeat after me. Hail Mary, Mother of God. And she forces the hippies to do Hail Marys for about 6 minutes until she is satisfied in exposing the horse shit. And then she leaves the stage. Just going to turn my light on here because it's dusk.
Getting dark. Yeah, well,
my favorite
the land acknowledgement.
This is how the land acknowledgements start in '92.
Yeah.
It's a person with a great sense of humor making hippies do Hail Marys.
Yeah, well, I know if although they weren't the first probably to do it, it was the opposition to the Olympics in 2010 that led for this idea, or it was already obviously percolating, but you had to make Aboriginal leaders believe that they were the authority that had to be pacified in order for national things to happen. And then with that occurring, and actually his name is what the hell is his last name? He was the chancellor of UBC Point, Stephen Point, who
Oh,
was
who
the
goes on to be the lieutenant governor,
lieutenant governor.
whose daughter is now the
Warbus.
Warbus,
I
the
know.
laziest constituency MLA in British Columbia.
Yeah.
Her constituency office has no hours and does no work.
Well, so she's a different standard.
Well, she's a
You
princess.
demanding that
I wouldn't put a princess of
she
any
has
ethnicity in charge of anything
European
democratic.
adopt European conceptions of time. This is all very colonialist.
Well, she
I think.
said we never
Anyway,
asked for
Stephen
the light
Point. To
bulb.
get to Stephen Point, who is the um, chancellor of
Yeah, he's
UBC.
still the chancellor. He's not the LG yet. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, whenever he's a real operator. Anyway,
And it's
he's
called the aristocrats.
ugh. Anyway, I can't stand these neo-tribal elites. They are
Yeah,
just
no, the neo-traditionalists
terrible.
are I mean, neo-traditionalist movements are highly effective, but they freight a lot of bullshit.
Oh yeah.
The
Well,
most neo-traditionalist slogan in popular use right now is "Make America Great Again."
yeah. But anyway, the term neo-tribal
Yeah,
elite that I is actually taken from Elizabeth Rada, who's a academic in New Zealand, who writes very, very important political economy stuff on the Maori in New Zealand. Anyway, it's about how Aboriginal organizations have been transformed by their uh, position that they take in capitalism. So you have the Aboriginal group, but the Aboriginal group that exists is not the same as it was traditionally. Obviously, it's been transformed by all these kinds of political and economic processes that have been taking place, and so these neo-tribal elites, which are people like Stephen Point, who are seen as being the representatives of the Aboriginal population. Um, anyway, he's telling this story about the Olympics of everyone having to go and treat Aboriginal leaders or these representatives as if they were spokespeople of countries, like this kind of idea.
oh,
So
yes, the many nations of 200 people.
yeah, like it's all invented stuff, but everyone at this time, before we're really seeing the end result of this, is thinking this is just symbolic gestures, which is just makes everyone feel good, and it's not gonna result in anything that's gonna cost us anything. We're just gonna pretend that these people are, you know, whatever it is, like representatives of these countries, and then they'll feel that they're being flattered, and they'll let us do what we want to do, and nothing else. There's really nothing else, and so now we just have this unbelievable monster that's been growing for the last 50 years that has got to be tackled with, like the falsehoods are just immense that we've been building up for the last 50 years that now we have to face the falsehoods that have been.
Absolutely. And what I would argue is when I was living in Rhode Island, I had the opportunity to have the apartment next door to a Hawaiian princess.
uh,
And I would argue my description for the thing you're talking about is the Hawaiian system, because Hawaii is the first place it elaborated fully. The British were far too interested in making deals with that included indigenous commoners. But in highly vertical, non-agrarian systems, um, you can make a deal with the tiny aristocracy,
mm,
and you can agree on the project of oppressing their commoners with them in
exactly.
exchange for dealing them in at a very high level. Right. Let's remember that Barack Obama went to the second most prestigious boarding school in Hawaii
Oh yeah.
because the most prestigious only admitted the descendants of members of King Kamehameha's court.
Okay.
And so the Hawaiian systems developed there. and it's globalized starting in the 90s with the rise of neoliberalism. That there's this realization that the and so the kid down the hall from me, 19 years old, drives a Mercedes Benz at Obama's inaugural ball. Her father owns the entire telecommunication system of Hawaii. Hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in play. When she gives her class presentation for her 1 year program at the Rhode Island School of Design, her oral presentation is attended by both senators and the governor. And the thing is that we've realized, and this is not just true of Canada and New Zealand, but Taiwan merits very serious attention. They're 2 steps ahead of us on gender weighing and on indigeneity and on lawfare against people like us. Taiwan has got to be brought into the analysis. And there's this realization.
So I don't quite understand, what is their gender weighing? I don't know anything.
The same as us.
So
Taiwan is
woke,
a wokistan.
They're excessively woke. Is that
yes, Taiwan is a complete wokistan, and they're 2 steps ahead of us on all this stuff, on criminalizing misgendering, censorship, lawfare against people like us, and creating and taking a bunch of indigenous nobles who had very little power and exalting them into the global capitalist class.
Okay.
Understanding that they are the most effective and precise agents of the dispossession and oppression of the actual indigenous people, while concurrently conferring a new form of legitimacy on the government that excludes most of the population there. So 3% of Taiwan is indigenous. The whole theory of Taiwan's independence on the part of the Taiwanese Progressive Party is based on indigenous sovereignty, just like the theory of the New Zealand Labour Party, just like the theory of the BC
who are the indigenous people of Taiwan?
Pardon me?
Who are the indigenous people of Taiwan?
They were the people who were there before the Chinese and Japanese started colonizing the island in the 18th century.
Okay.
Very similar to indigenous people here.
Well, I didn't even know there were indigenous people.
If you don't bring Hawaii and Taiwan into the analysis, you don't see the global picture. There is a single global picture. Canada, New Zealand, Australia, we're all trying to converge with the Hawaiian model, and Taiwan is ahead of us.
Okay.
And it's about the idea that the legitimacy of your country's existence is based on a tiny minority of the population and its hierarchical hereditary structure.
Lineage. Yeah. So what's your views on the unmarked graves, Stuart?
On who?
On the unmarked graves.
Oh, well, this is why you became a personal hero of mine. It's like, we've used a technology that is only viewed as legitimate on ghost hunter documentaries. Like, really? We've gone ghost hunter documentary? I think it's great because it's a boundary maintenance thing. Look at the horse shit it forces people to say.
Yeah.
It's like how dare you say that the graves aren't there? No, of course we can't look for them. I mean, it's great because what it is it's a test of whether you will reject materialism.
Yeah.
It's whether you will say the idea in your head about what's here beats what's here.
Yeah, well, it's like it's got a lot of things like the biological sexes. My own situation now is like there's 2 claims that I'll die on these hills. There are only 2 sexes, and the remains of 215 children have not been confirmed at the camera.
And that is a really polite way of saying it. We all know this is utter horseshit and a grift. That's what, like, there's no point in even being polite anymore because no matter what we say, they're going to say that we've advocated the murder of all of the indigenous people and all the gender confused children, no matter what we say. No
Yeah.
matter what we say, we've got to recognize that our words should be about mobilizing our people, not placating theirs, because they can't be placated. And in fact, the more reasonable what you say sounds to their people, the harder they're going to go after you. So yeah,
But I'm not sure
a
in
lot of
terms of
people,
the grift and everything.
a
So
lot of.
I assume that you're familiar with the satanic panic that
Oh yes,
happened.
no, I totally am. If we could just say one more thing before
Yeah,
we get to the satanic panic,
yeah.
it's this expression, "the hill you want to die on," and all these former friends of mine are like, "Really, Stuart? Is this the hill you want to die on?" And my
Definitely.
response is, "When the fuck did you get so interested in killing people on hills?"
Well,
Like,
it's a
here's the
good. I think it's
problem.
a
Why
good.
do
I
you
think
want to
it's a
kill
good.
people
It's a
on
good
hills all of
metaphor.
a
It's a good
sudden?
metaphor, right? Is that I will not. I will not give anything on these matters because
Oh,
I'm very confident about them. Other things I don't. I just find everything is so difficult to say. Okay, I have all the facts at my fingertips to say this is absolute bullshit. But to get to the satanic
satanic
panic,
panic. Yeah, go.
so is your view that the people who like thought that there was these satanic rituals, did they truly believe that there was these satanic abuse that was happening?
Here's my view is pretty on the ground. Um, some bad shit happened to me back in the day,
Mm,
and it means that I have a tendency to confabulate.
mm,
Um, right when people say, um, always believe women when they say they've been raped.
mm.
Um, there's a kernel of truth in that nonsense, and it's this: almost all false rape accusations are made by people who were really raped by someone they don't remember raping them. The tendency to confabulate and the tendency to tell predatory lies is typically grounded in some kind of real trauma. We are not natural confabulators and liars. We are skilled at it, but we have those skills to cope with bad things happening to us. So, my general feeling is that, yeah, people who got fucked up one way or another are much more susceptible, and I'm one of them,
Mm.
to believing falsehoods. And that's why I'm very committed to reality checking tools. That's why I'm a big fan of
Yeah,
people like you. I do a
yeah.
lot of reality checking because I have some minor brain injuries from my childhood that
Mm.
makes me susceptible to confabulation if it serves my interests.
Yeah. But I think that the Aboriginal, these people who are making these claims, which are not, and there's no evidence for them, and it's highly improbable kinds of scenarios. Um, they've been influenced. I'm not sure if you know of this guy. If you've read, his name is Kevin Annett.
I met him in
Oh,
1993. I
yeah,
was there for the origin of Kevin Annett. I was,
oh yeah,
I mean, back in the 90s, one of the reasons I find this such an interesting debate, one of the reasons Terry Glavin and I are still here,
yeah,
is we
yeah,
were here for the whole story.
yeah, yeah. No, I know Terry was writing on Annett.
Yeah, I met Kevin before Terry did.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah. No,
met him
I've
before he
only
was
I
defrocked.
only became aware of him in the two
I,
thousands.
yeah, but Annett is himself obviously very hurt by something that made him crazy.
Yeah, like you see the I know
He's
similar
very,
things.
very not okay. You pick that up right away.
Persecuted, like you get you're persecuted and you become slightly deranged and whatever. But anyway, Anna has been involved with Aboriginal people in the communities and so on since the 90s.
I know.
And and I don't think people should be surprised when we know what we know about misremembering and implanting memories and so on. He's hanging around with a bunch of alcoholics on Skid Row in Vancouver, and he's got an axe to grind with the churches and
Well, but
the
the Annan
residential.
origin story
Yeah.
starts when no, there's actually like there is a single bad act that where he takes license to go mad. And I talked him through this. I watched him make the dark turn. That's the
Okay.
thing, right? I've been
So when
around.
did you meet? Where did you meet him?
He invited me when I was leader of the Green Party of British
Oh
Columbia
wow.
um, to his Anglican church in Port Alberni
United
when
Church.
yeah, United Church, sorry,
Yep.
before he turned bad. And I was at a really good event that he ran
Yeah. Yeah.
where there were a lot of people who were struggling with the main issue I was concerned about, which was the massive social assistance austerity that the BC NDP brought in '93. With
Okay.
so they eliminated the unemployable category. They
Mm,
capped the number of disabled people on disability in BC at 20,000.
mm,
They forced everybody to reapply. So a really fucked up Indigenous people in his congregation
yeah.
who went from getting $714 a month to
Mm,
$500 a month.
yeah.
Another bunch of fucked up people who went from $595 to 500.
Mm,
And that was a real thing because Harcourt was also demonizing them on TV and calling them welfare cheats and deadbeats and
yeah.
varmints.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then all of the migrants from Alberta and Ontario poured in,
Yeah.
and it was a shit show. And a lot
Mm,
of people, a lot of very poor people were made more poor and their lives got a lot worse.
yeah.
And if you were Indigenous, they stopped covering your housing. So you didn't go from 595
Mm,
to 500. You went from 595 to 175 a month.
yeah.
And Annette was putting on an event
Mm,
to help people deal with this.
yeah.
And he had a bunch of people there who really did have bad experiences in residential school. And I should
Right.
know because I knew Harry Cannon, who was one of the rapists who ran who was the math teacher on the Ahousaht Indian Reserve. So
Mm,
he raped his daughter, he raped my mother, and he raped a lot of Indian girls.
mm.
So let's remember there was a truly evil thing that was going on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
the same time, the class action around around the residential schools was starting. And
Mm,
the first thing Mercredi and Fontaine did, the first thing they conceded in the negotiation with the insurance companies was we'll only compensate living victims. There'll be no wrongful death compensation. And that's what set him off.
mm,
And it was a normal anti poverty activist with a lot of trauma. And when they told one of the women that he was looking after at the United Church that that she couldn't claim for the death of her twin sister, she went nuts and then he went nuts.
mm,
And it was tragic watching him fuck his job because he's on the phone with a fucking 22-year-old with
mm,
no state power making $750 a month. And I'm the guy taking his fucking calls.
mm.
And what the church did to him was unfair. They should have put him on psych leave. That's what he needed. But they're like, don't
Well,
you
as
fuck
well,
up this deal.
part of the story is the land. Like there was some kind of land issue with the United Church as well. So, and that it wasn't just about the whatever residential school stuff. It was there was this claim that one of the
Oh, I
Aboriginal groups
know.
had, and he was
No,
going.
that
So
was after he'd
the
already
church
started
was
going
trying to
crazy.
defend, like they saw him as a danger to their assets, the kind of
I know,
stuff.
and also to their insurance coverage,
Yeah.
right? And the insurance coverage is the story about TRC that only I'm telling,
Mm,
right? That every dollar Harper spent elaborating that stupid process
mm,
was a dollar the insurance companies didn't have to pay in compensation. So
okay.
it was insurance. It was an insurance industry indemnification strategy that
Mm,
jumped the fence.
mm,
And if Harper had
yeah.
been so interested in indemnifying the church's insurance companies,
Yeah.
we wouldn't be left with half of the horse shit we're dealing with now.
Well, and just in terms of whether it's because this I get into discussions with people a lot about, is this intentional deception? Is this self deception? And from what I've seen, just looking at all the testimonies and stuff is that I don't think almost, well, not the industry, not the Aboriginal industry, but all the people, I don't think they're lying.
No, they're not.
They believe this things, their memory is not, they're not they're not critical thinkers, these people
And
anyway.
they have
So
trauma-induced brain damage,
yeah,
most of
they have a lot of things that have happened to them. They're very suggestible.
Yeah.
And so you get like Kevin Annett type figures wandering around making all these suggestions for 20 years. And there's all these kind of stories that are percolating all over the place. And then you get this announcement by the Kamloops band, which that's another interesting thing that happened there, because there was a lot of manipulation that happened
Of
by the
course.
industry. Like the industry saw
The
this
industry
as
needed them to tell that lie.
they did, they needed it. But you're not lying if you believe what you see. And
Actually, you
there's
know
so there's
what? I'm going to take issue with that.
hmm,
Honestly, if you know that there's something wrong with your brain that makes you that way, you got to own that. Like that's a message disabled people need to hear. Disabled people get better when they own responsibility for their disability's impact on other people.
hmm,
We have this whole disability discourse that's about coddling, and it doesn't make disabled people healthier.
hmm,
Disabled people get healthier when you say, we know you can do it. We know you can rise above your disability and discipline yourself and prevent your disability. Like my Uncle Barton was retarded. He never learned to read. I worked on him at Christmas every year, teaching it to working on him so he could spell his own name before he died.
hmm.
But Uncle Barton was taught an ethic of responsibility and duty. And that is what most disabled people need. If you've been injured or disabled, I have a friend who has severe neurological disabilities, but he doesn't believe it. He would much rather be a fuck up than a cripple. He would much rather things be his fault than other people's fault.
Yeah, okay, but
And
in terms of this
that's
thing
the
about
issue.
the misremembering and so on,
Yeah.
you know, instead of, and I think that it's just to alert Aboriginal people who are making these, putting forth these stories, that do you know that it's very easy to suggest things to people and have them believe that that's the case. That's not hard to do at all. And it was kind of funny. I was when I was in Manitoba at one of my many, kind of confrontations, as they say. I met this guy. His name is Callum. Really nice guy. He wasn't Aboriginal, but he was participating in the street epistemology stuff, and he was telling me that his friend of his, when he was walking to this event, because they were having a discussion about this misremembering situation, his friend, he was a Star Wars fan, and he'd grown up like being really interested in Star Wars. And his friend was a Star Wars fan too. And his friend managed to convince him on the way walking to this session that there was an actual character in Star Wars that did not exist at all. And his friend managed to convince him that he remembered this. He remembered this character in Star Wars just by suggesting it to him and creating this really, really kind of convincing story. So you have people who, first of all, they want to believe that there's all these murdered children. They want to believe it
Oh,
because
yeah,
that would
because they got
be
their own agenda.
the horrible white man and all this stuff. And then
Well,
it would
what they
just feed
want
into
is to
their,
be the opposite of their ancestors. They don't want to be consistent with their ancestors. Don't want to really own their past.
mm-hmm.
They
So
want
then they want
to,
to blame, so it's all
yeah,
about, everything we do is due to all this terrible things that were done to our
yeah,
parents
exactly.
before
There
our
were
parents.
never good people before 1995. There were no good
So
white people before 1995. All the white people before 1995 had bad intentions and were evil. And we are the most special white people in the world because we've transcended that.
mm,
That narrative is the powerful narrative driving this horse shit.
well, it's a lot of it is you want to blame other people for your circumstances, and this is, of course, the ultimate blame that your ancestors were just put through these horrible kind of events, and then this has been passed down the line from one generation to another until
But,
now
but
you're dealing with all these kinds of very, very, people who can't function properly. And instead of having honest conversations with the people who can't function properly, we have all these people who are saying, no, we should just believe them, like believe everything they say. That's the way to be, to help them overcome their oppression, when it's the
right.
absolute opposite kind of situation that has happened.
So when I back in my old job, which I really do miss, right? Because I know how to hurt you. That take the things you love. Like we didn't talk about 7 of the 11 cancellation campaigns were about me getting kicked out of Dungeons and Dragons groups.
All right.
And those campaigns were run internationally. Like they
Okay.
involved like dozens of Swedish tech workers who didn't even know me,
Mm.
going, you've got to quit this guy's D&D group, because they hate joy, right? They hate the idea that we are leading lives that are worthwhile. But the thing is, I got so I really miss teaching, and I bet you do too, because
Mhm.
I it's a lot of fun, like shouting down someone agreeing with you. It's my favorite thing in the world because I really enjoy shouting and I really enjoy clever people. And this interview has been a giant pile of fun on that basis. But here's the thing: I had this amazing opportunity that nearly got me into a bar fight in Quesnel.
Oh,
I got to teach the history of BC First Nations, no, sorry, North American First Nations since 1850 for the First Nations Studies Department at Simon Fraser University.
mm.
The very fact that I've been allowed to do that in 2014 nearly got me into a bar fight in 2019 as the discourse degraded. But so I had this thing where it was a cross listed course. I was a history professor, not a First Nation studies professor. So I had 8 Indigenous students and 15, not Indigenous students. And I don't know why people hate the word settler. We were always the good guys in a John Wayne movie. Like settler was a compliment. Like I'm not going to get into competitive offense taking. Call me a settler. What you're saying is I'm like a nonviolent. I'm like a nonviolent person trying to work hard in America. Why am I going to take that as an insult just because you mean it in an insulting way? John Wayne thought the settlers were the best people. So did most literature. So did James Fenimore Cooper, you know. But the thing is, so I
well,
got
it's
to teach this
material. It's rooted
course.
to material reality too,
Yeah.
as you say.
So I got to
You
teach this.
are, we are settled. We settled.
Yeah,
Like
we
we might
settled,
have,
and we should be
it,
proud of that.
and many Aboriginal people have settled. So
Yeah.
they've all
So
settled too. So everyone's
yeah,
a settler. Uh,
exactly. So I got to teach this course before the gaslighting began, and I was and I I was like, oh, it's very clearly, look, I'm going to be a total racist here. I'm going to tell the story the Indigenous students that's designed to appeal to them. That's going to be designed to be helpful to them,
mm,
but not in the way people imagine.
mm,
So I focused the 2 books that I got to focus on. The first one was about Reconstruction in Indian Territory, where the Cherokee, the Choctaw, the Creeks, the Seminoles, the 5 civilized tribes fought for the Confederacy,
mm,
obviously because they had the most extreme labor shortages because of the epidemics.
mm,
So they needed their slaves in a way that like white Southerners didn't need them because they were in a real demographic crisis. So of course they're going to fight for the fucking Confederacy. And then they had to go through Reconstruction and they had to fight out Indian territory with black people and white people and their former slaves. And they had to make some deals. Murray Wickett's book, Contested Territory, is wonderful. My Indigenous students loved it. You know why? Because
they're the
for
slave
once they
owners.
got to be the bad guys.
They got to be the slave owners.
They got to be the slave owners. They got to be the bad guys. You know how sick any decent Indigenous person is of always being a victim?
Yeah,
Anybody
no,
who's jacking off to being a victim has something really wrong with them.
I know it's
Nobody wants to be a victim. No genuine
no,
victim wants to dine out on that
yeah,
unless there's
no.
something really wrong with them.
Well,
So,
it's a little corruption. It's
yeah, yeah,
corruption.
yeah, yeah. So
It's
people
like
are
when you're
willing.
given money, like this is the
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
kind of
yeah, yeah. I know
terrible thing.
because it's sex work. It's high level
I
sex
know
work.
it's
People are
disgusting.
jacking off to your oppression,
I
and if you
know
comply with it, they'll give you money. It's just high level sex
you're a
work.
prostitute.
Yes, exactly. That is
Yeah,
that
and
is
I think that's the anger, a
that
lot
is
of
not
anger.
the what did you call it? The neo tribal
Neo tribal
aristocracy.
elites.
Yeah,
Neo
yeah,
tribal
yeah. They're
elites.
high level sex workers. They're highest level
Yeah.
sex workers in the
Oh
world.
God.
And I should know because my mother was the de facto president of the Octoroon Ball in Vancouver. Not that there was one, but if there had been, she would have been the president. So
Mm.
yeah, I get it. High level sex workers. That's their thing. And we don't want that. Nobody
No,
wants that. No
no,
good person wants that.
no.
No
And so
amount
that
of
was
money is
another.
enough
So
for
Stuart,
shaming
we're
yourself.
coming up
Let me
on
just
two
finish.
hours. Hey,
Let me
wait,
just
wait,
finish with the second half
the
of
second
the
word,
course.
the sex workers.
The
First of all,
second half
we
of the
should
course,
never call it sex work
I
anyway.
know it's
Like you're telling,
prostitution. Um,
it's
so
not work.
I know. Well, it is work. It's just the worst work in the world. Um,
No, it's not. It's not. It's all just people. Something. It's slavery. Like it's basically
yes, it
someone
is.
owning
It's
your
it's the
body.
kind of work like nobody. It's like, oh, how can you say it's not work? It's like, well, nobody's ever trafficked anyone into chartered accountants.
Yeah, I
It's
know.
shitty work, but nobody's going to be trafficked into it.
Yeah.
So here's what I end with. The other thing that I gave them was this amazing study of comparing the indigenous ghettos in Winnipeg and Minneapolis to
Yeah.
the black ghettos in LA and Chicago.
Mm.
And the message I had for my indigenous students was the reason your grandmother raised you is because you're part of a racialized urban underclass.
Mm.
Like all those grandmother things are faked. There were no
Yeah.
female elders in those systems. There were only male elders in those systems. But the great thing is that your experience of being raised by your grandmother is an experience you share with Black people all over the world, with Roma people over the world, with the Hmong throughout all of East Asia. And you are part of one people of people who were oppressed by
The underclass.
capitalism, racialized by capitalism, and raised by their grandmothers. And that's why you're good at hip hop. And my indigenous students love that. And my white students wanted to lynch me.
Okay. Well. Okay, Stuart. Well, anything else you think? We're basically at 2 hours, but
That was a
you
good
think?
punchline, I feel. We don't need
Okay,
to go
I
any
think
further.
that'll be good. So a lot of interesting ideas.
Let's do a public event with Glavin soon.
Yeah. So are you're okay, so I'll just finish it. We can continue talking after I turn it off. But anyway, so
Sure.
Stuart, I just wanted to thank you. It was a very interesting conversation, a little bit all over the place, but hey, that's what happens when you have all these topics that you've got to choose from. But thanks very much for appearing on the Rational Space Disputations.
This was a giant pile of fun. It was kind of the way I hoped it would go.
Okay, thanks a lot.